Hey there, it's Crystal Diaz here and welcome. I'm so glad that you are here because today in this episode, we're diving into something that truly impacts every single one of us, which is how to reclaim your time and start living in a way that feels in alignment, that feels more intentional and fulfilling for you. One of the most common things that I hear from the people that I coach is, I wish I had more time to do the things I really want. And I totally get it. Since 2008, I've been helping people find their voices, whether it's through singing, speaking, or just how they show up in life. And this struggle with time comes up over and over again. If you've ever felt like you're constantly busy and you're not really getting anywhere, or like there's never enough time for the things you truly care about, then this episode is for you. Specifically, we're going to be talking about how to get your time back so that you can finally start doing the things that are meaningful to you, that uplift you, energize you, and essentially bring more joy back into your life. Hey, it's Crystal Diaz here, and you are listening to the Resonate podcast, where we explore the powerful ways you can use your voice to inspire others, make a positive impact on the world, and create the life of your dreams. So today I'm going to help you reclaim your time and energy. I'm going to share 3 powerful questions that will shift how you think about time so that you can take control of it. These questions are pretty simple, but they go deep. Okay, so grab a journal, grab a notebook, or just let these questions sit with you. When I meet people for the first time and I tell them that I'm a personal development coach specializing in helping people find their voices, whether it's through singing, speaking, or communicating, I often hear this: "Oh, I'd love to work on that. I just don't have the time." Sounds familiar, right? In my experience, people who say that they don't have time typically fit in a particular type of profile. Usually, they're high achievers, they're doers, they are action takers, they're always busy, always on the go. These are the people who go on vacation and can't switch off. They feel guilty for just relaxing. These are the parents who feel torn between work and family, worried that they're failing at both. Now, if this is you, I totally get it. And I mean it when I say that because this is me too, right? Because life pulls you in a million different directions and it can feel impossible to take back control of your own time. But that's exactly why we need to have this conversation. So the first question I'd like you to ask yourself is simply, how am I spending my time? So I know this sounds totally simple, but I want you to be really honest with yourself. And how often do we really ask ourselves this question, right? Do we really sit and ponder this question? So take a look at the past 3 to 6 months, maybe even the past year, and consider in general how you've been spending your time. Now, if this question feels really broad, then you can ask yourself instead, what's been taking up my energy over these past 3 to 6 months? What has been exhausting for me? Because here's the truth. Where you choose to focus your attention is where you are choosing to spend your energy. And that is all related to how you're spending your time. And so think about the past 6 months. What has been taking up most of your energy? In preparing for this episode, I looked up some studies on how the average person spends their time on a day-to-day basis. And it's really, really interesting. For example, the average person spends 52 minutes a day talking about other people. Actually, I think that's a pretty conservative estimate, to be honest. And when I say talking about other people, I mean people who aren't in the conversation. So this could be gossiping, or it could just be talking about people in general, casual conversations about other people. And literally, this happened to me just recently, a few weeks ago. So I was out with some friends who I hadn't seen in a really long time. And 80% of that conversation was about other people. Like who's dating who got laid off, who has what reputation in this industry, who went on this crazy diet and lost a ton of weight and then gained it back. I mean, honestly, it was actually exhausting. I mean, it wasn't like anything malicious was being said at all. It was just really pointless. And when I left, I felt totally drained. And I'm sure you've been in conversations like that as well. Now, I want you to contrast that type of conversation with conversations you've had that have been truly inspiring. So I'm talking about conversations that light you up, that teach you something or get you excited about something. I mean, already just imagining that, you can feel the difference in terms of that energetic feel, right? And so here's the thing. If you find yourself repeatedly pulled into conversations that drain you, remember that is still a choice that you're making on how you're spending your time. And it's really not just about the time spent in that conversation. It's also about the time you need to spend recovering from conversations like that afterwards, because they're just so draining. And we're just talking about here one aspect of how an average person spends their time on a day-to-day basis, because here are some other stats that I think is really interesting. The average person spends 2.5 hours a day on social media, 2 hours and 55 minutes, so 3 hours watching TV, 2.5 hours managing emails. And get this, Harvard researchers found that 46.7% of our waking hours are actually spent thinking about something other than what we are doing. So that's almost half of our day lost to mind wandering. Okay, so now there's the talking about the other people thing, there's the social media scrolling thing, there's the endless email checking, mind wandering, right? So these are just examples of how many of us are choosing, often without realizing it, to spend our time. And so what I want you to do is think about this and write it all down and really be brutally honest with yourself. Where is your time going? Because if you want to claim your time back, the first step is becoming aware of how it's being spent or how it's being used to begin with. It's kind of like money, right? If you're making all of this money and that money just goes straight out the door as soon as you make it and you wonder why you have no money left, then tracking your spending will give you some answers. And let me tell you why this is important if you want to reclaim your time back. When you see how much of your day is actually tied up in these sometimes unavoidable, often meaningless or mindless activities, doesn't it make the rest of your time feel all the more precious? It does, right? Because now, when you catch yourself engaging in yet another conversation that drains your energy, now you can catch yourself and make a decision to change the topic or walk away so that you can preserve your energy for the things that are meaningful to you, for the things that do matter. Or when you notice that you're spending 6 hours on a project that really should only take you 2 hours to complete because you're stuck in perfectionism, you can pause and ask yourself, is this really worth my time and my energy? Because every time you say yes to something, you're spending time and energy on that thing. But it's so easy for us to forget that. It's so easy for us to forget that we're trading our precious time for these things. And so if you're constantly feeling rushed, you're constantly feeling drained, you never seem to have the time or energy for the things that actually light you up, and I'm talking about the things that are meaningful to you and that actually serve your needs, then it's time to have this conversation with yourself. Because nothing is going to change unless you change. And change is only going to happen when you start making different choices. And so this question or this exercise really is not about judging yourself. It's not about feeling bad about how you've been spending your time up until this point. It's really just about laying it all out and just being honest with yourself. Now, if this feels overwhelming to think of how you've been spending your time over the past 3 to 6 months, what you can do is actually start tracking your activities over, say, the next 3 to 5 days. So you can carry around a notebook and then just write down and just jot down everything that you do. But make sure it's 3 to 5 typical days that you're tracking. So not like 3 to 5 days while you're on a beach vacation or 3 to 5 days when you're doing something that's unusual for you. Because you might be really surprised at how much time has actually been slipping away from you without your full awareness. Again, it's really like tracking your budget, right? If you take note of every single purchase that you make, then every time you do make a purchase, you become that much more intentional. You become that much more self-aware. Here are a few other interesting statistics that I want to share with you. So on average, we spend about 55 minutes a day commuting. We spend another 35 minutes a day just making decisions, whether that's what to wear, what to eat, what movie to watch. All right, so that's already over an hour of your day just gone. Okay, hour and a half of your day gone. And now get this, over a lifetime, on average, we spend 6 months just waiting in line at the grocery store, at the bank, Disneyland, Universal Studios. I mean, we've all been there, right? We've all been in lineups where we're just like, why is this taking so long? 6 months of our lives just spent waiting in line. Now, again, I'm not saying here that you should learn to make quicker decisions or that you should cut people in line or never go to Disneyland ever again or move closer to work so that you can avoid commuting. The point of this exercise is really just to take stock of where our time is actually going. Because if we can recognize that so much of our time is already being spent on meaningless, mindless things, it might actually push us to be more selective about what we say yes to, especially the things we agree to without even thinking. So I'm talking about the things that we automatically do or automatically say yes to because we feel we have to. Because the reality is that if you want something to change, you can't keep doing the same things over and over again, hoping that change is going to come to you. Change happens through you. It happens through you when you start intentionally making different choices. But sometimes we need a little inspiration or a little motivation to start making those choices. And so this exercise where we're just laying everything out is hopefully going to be able to help motivate you to make different choices when it comes to choosing how you're spending your time. So this leads us to the second question that I encourage you to ask yourself. Once you've taken stock of how you've been spending your time, so you've taken that inventory of all the things that you're doing with your time over the past 3 to 6 months, then the next question to ask yourself is, how do you feel about it? That's it. How do you feel about the way you've been spending your time? And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier too. So I want you to take a look at what you're doing on a typical basis and consider, what are you doing that energizes you? And what are you doing that drains you of energy, that depletes your energy? Then consider the proportion of time that you're spending doing those different activities. So is it mostly draining, or is it mostly energizing, or is it a nice balance between the two? Because if you're somebody who feels like you never have enough time, that you're exhausted most days, then it's more likely that you're spending most of your time engaging in energy draining activities. And probably you're not spending enough time on energy restoring activities. Okay, so there's energy draining activities versus energy restoring activities. And so that's a really important distinction to become aware of. How much of my time is spent doing things that drain me and how much of my time is spent doing things that nurture me, that restore me? And is it truly balanced? But here's another potential scenario. Maybe you are super busy. Maybe you are feeling drained and tired. But actually, when you look at what you're doing, the things that you are doing actually feels very meaningful to you. Maybe it's the kind of tiredness that you don't mind feeling. For example, maybe you're working really hard on growing a business that you really believe in, and that's taking up 80% of your time or more. And you say to yourself, well, I don't mind sacrificing some social time or sacrificing my mindfulness practices or creativity because I'm just so passionate about what I'm building. I believe in it so much. Now, if this is you, first of all, that's awesome. But even then, I would argue that balance is still key. You can't really operate at 100% all the time without recharging or nurturing your own well-being. And I'm not just talking about getting enough sleep. I'm talking about exercising your creative mind, nurturing your self-awareness through mindfulness practices, things like that. If you're constantly pushing yourself without taking time to recharge, then your body and your mind will eventually hit a breaking point. This is classic burnout, right? And when that happens, guess what? You're going to need even more time after the fact just to recover. I mean, think about it. If you're overworking yourself, you're skipping breaks, you are ignoring your need for rest, you're not engaging your creative mind, eventually your energy tank is going to run dry. And when it does, you're not just going to lose time, you're going to lose productivity, creativity, clarity, and maybe even your health. And we're just talking about people here who love what they do and throw themselves in their work because they're passionate about it and never give themselves a break. But what about the other end of the spectrum here? Say you are busy, say you are constantly tired, and on top of that, you know deep down that what you're doing actually feels meaningless to you. You know deep down that what you're doing is no longer in alignment, or maybe has never been in alignment with who you want to be. If that's the case, you really need to seriously ask yourself, why are you still doing it? And is it true that this is the only way to live your life? And so that's why this question is so important, because it invites us to just pause and check in with our deeper selves. Are you spending time on things that genuinely matter to you? And if not, why not? Is there really no other way to live your life? And also, are you creating space for energy restoring activities like physical movement, hobbies, mindfulness practices, engaging in meaningful connections with other people, engaging your creative mind? Because if you are not, then you are missing out on some incredibly powerful opportunities to remind yourself of who you are, what your values are, and what is truly meaningful to you. So here's the bottom line. If you don't feel good about the way you've been spending your time, then ignoring how you feel and plowing ahead anyway, hoping things will get better someday, sometime in the future, or distracting yourself from these feelings by binging on Netflix, playing video games or partying or whatever, doing these things is not going to give you your time back. In fact, you're more likely to feel like your time is not really yours. So the first step here is to acknowledge what your feelings are telling you. Because if we can honestly say to ourselves, okay, so I see how I've been spending my time, and no, this does not feel good. No, this does not feel balanced. Then we can continue this conversation with ourselves. We can ask ourselves, okay, what would need to happen in order for me to feel good and balanced about the way I'm spending my time? So what's one small change that I can make in this direction? If we can start consciously implementing changes, even small changes in the way that we are spending our time, and we can do so in a way that prioritizes our energy and our well-being, now you're putting yourself back in the driver's seat of your own life. Then time won't feel like it's just constantly running away from you. All right, but now you might be thinking, okay, so all of this makes sense, logically speaking, right? Take an inventory of how we've been spending our time, figure out what we want to change about it. And you might be thinking, yes, I want to do this. I want to make this change. And you might even know exactly what you can do to start making change happen. But here's the question. Will you actually do it? Because how often do we actually do the things we know we should be doing? And so this leads us to the third important question that I invite you to consider in this conversation that you're having with yourself. And this one goes a little deeper. If you are spending your time in ways that leave you feeling depleted or unfulfilled, and you know this, and maybe you even know what you should be doing instead, but you still haven't done it, then the question is, what beliefs are keeping you stuck there? Let me share a story with you. I was working with somebody recently who described herself as a doer. And so she really prided herself on always being busy and always taking action. And then one day she told me that she had some holiday leave to clear at work, and she was forced to take a vacation. So she actually used the word forced, as if going on holiday was this big burden that she just had to deal with, right? So when I pointed this out to her and I asked her, why do you feel this way? Why do you feel like you're being forced to go on holiday? Her answer was really interesting. So she thought about it for a minute and then she said, I just don't know what to do with myself when I'm not working. And actually, this is really common. I mean, I certainly relate to this on a personal level. I remember when my husband and I went to Italy for our honeymoon, we spent the first day at this beautiful but very, very quiet vineyard. And so we were sitting at this table, we had this wonderful bottle of wine, we had some snacks, and I was just so antsy. I was shifting in my seat, I was looking around. I mean, it was beautiful, but I kept looking around wondering where everybody was. Like, why are we the only ones here? What are we missing out on? Why is it so quiet? Right? And so then I asked my husband, okay, what exactly are we supposed to be doing right now? And then he looked at me like I had grown an extra head and he was like, we're doing it. So when my client said to me, I just don't know what to do with myself when I'm not working, I completely 100% related to her, because so often we tie our identity and ultimately our self-worth to the things that we do externally. So to our achievements, our roles in life, our activities, rather than to our intrinsic qualities. So this can look like valuing yourself based on how much you can accomplish in one day, feeling worthy only when you've been super productive or when you've been useful to other people, or defining yourself by your job title, your financial success, or social approval. So if in the past you've been praised for being an action taker, a problem solver, a person who always gets things done, always reliable, then it makes sense why you are constantly busy. Because being busy is typically what it looks like to be an action taker, or to be a problem solver, to be a doer, a high achiever, etc., etc. And this is why when presented with the opportunity to not be busy, all of a sudden, that feels very uncomfortable. It feels like we're doing something wrong, like it's going against our identity. It's going against who we think we are. And so this is why it's worthwhile to ask yourself, what beliefs are driving you to make the choices you've been making up until this point? Because if your self-worth is tied to being busy, to being constantly on the go, then you will keep filling your time with doing just to continue to feel valuable, because it would be a threat to your sense of self to do otherwise. So if you're still watching or listening to this right now and you're resonating with what I'm saying here, and you are ready to make some changes in your life and you want to take control of your time, then I want to remind you again that time itself is not the problem. We all have 24 hours in a day, whether we like it or not. Right? We can't change that. We can't make it so that we have 30 hours in a day, as much as we would like to sometimes. But we can change how we spend it. So instead of wishing for more time or thinking that you're just in this constant race against time, focus your attention on how you're spending it currently, and then ask yourself, do you feel good about the way you're spending it? Because if not, then you can ask yourself that third question, which is, what deeper beliefs are driving you to keep doing what you've been doing? Right? There must be a reason why you keep gravitating towards spending your time doing the things that you actually don't even want to do. And so here's the hopeful part. Every single second of every single day actually gives us an opportunity to make a different choice. You are choosing right now to spend your time listening to this podcast episode. So maybe you saw the title and you thought, yeah, that's what I want. I want to claim my time back. But this can't happen if we don't pause to check in with ourselves and to ask ourselves the hard questions. Simple, but hard questions. There's this book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. And in it, she says the number one regret that people have when they're dying is this: I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. So let's just really let that sink in. Because you deserve a life that feels authentic and fulfilling to you. You deserve to spend your time in ways that align with your values, with your energy, and your purpose. So if you want to reclaim control of your time, here's your homework. Number 1, take that inventory of how you've been spending your time over the past 3 to 6 months. Or alternatively, you can track your activities on a daily basis over the next 3 to 5 days. Number 2, check in with yourself. Ask yourself, how are you feeling about the way you've been spending your time? When you look at that list and you think about all the things that you're doing, all the ways that you're spending your time and your energy, ask yourself, how do you feel about it? Does it feel really good? Does it make you feel proud? Or do you look at it and think, why am I doing this? This is really important information that we don't often give ourselves permission to really think about and really consider. Number 3, dig deep and identify what beliefs have been driving your choices up until this point. Because if we don't identify those beliefs that are actually keeping us stuck in this pattern of behavior, then we can say we want to change, but it will be really hard for us to actually do it because these beliefs are still holding us back. So really dig deep and try to identify those beliefs and then question them. Really ask yourself, is this a belief that I want to continue to have? Is this belief truly serving me or keeping me stuck? I want to reiterate here that this homework is not about analyzing your schedule. It's not about time management skills. It's about gaining clarity. It's about knowing that you always have a choice in what you choose to spend your time and energy on. It's also about taking steps towards creating a life where you know that what you're doing feels truly aligned with who you want to be. Because when you take control of your time, you can take control of your life. I hope this episode resonates with you and inspires you to think a little differently about how you've been spending your time. And if so, please consider sharing it with a friend who might need to hear this message too. And if you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And I want to thank you again for being here with me. Remember, your voice matters and it deserves to be heard. So you've got this. Let's make the most out of the time that we have together. I'll see you in the next episode.